All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning and good afternoon for those of you who are joining us from the East Coast or other locations. Today, we're going to be hosting our webinar on the proposed registration fee increase. We have I think a really exciting set of information to go through and a lot of panelists to cover topics. Then we'll have some time at the end for discussion and feedback. So before we get started, I'm going to hand this over to Richard Sposs, who's going to walk through some background information on how we're going to be using Zoom and the other platforms that the webinar is being hosted on.
Thank you, Karen. As she stated, my name is Richard Sposs, and I'm the facilitator for today's webinar. For those just joining us, welcome. We are glad to see so many stakeholders attending today through the Zoom webinar, as well as anyone joining us through the Cal EPA webcast. If you are having technical issues, we ask that you please message us using the chat box. Please do not use the chat box while asking questions during the presentation. While you can submit questions during the webinar, our panelists will be answering all questions at the end of the entire presentation. For Zoom attendees, you can interact with the presenters through several different ways. To ask a question, you can use one of the three options. The first method is to type your questions using the Q&A box within Zoom. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom window. The second is when we ask for anyone has verbal questions, you can use the raise hand button within Zoom. And lastly, we will be taking questions via email at the regfees@cdpr.ca.gov address. That's regfees, REGFEES @cdpr.ca.gov. And when watching through the Cal EPA broadcast instead of Zoom webinar, please submit your questions through the regfees email address. Again, please do not use the chat function in Zoom to ask questions. I would also like to introduce today's presenters. Today you will hear from Val Dulcini, the Director of the California Department of Pesticide Regulation, Dr. Karen Morrison, Assistant Director of the Pesticide Programs Division, Dr. Tulio Macedo, Branch Chief of the Pesticide Registration Branch, and Clint Williams, the Application Development Group Manager and Contract Manager for the CalPEST project. Now that I've covered introductions, let us move on to today's presentation. I would like to introduce our first presenter, Dr. Karen Morrison.
Hi, good morning again. My name is Karen Morrison, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today. I'm actually going to hand this directly over to our director, Val Dulcini, for some opening comments, and then we will get into the meat of today's webinar.
Aaron and Richard, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. I think it was an unintentional coincidence that we used a green border on today's PowerPoint, but Aaron go bra for all of those Irish Americans out there. Today's opportunity is indeed to dig in a little bit more on the conversation around registration fees, and you'll hear from lots of subject matter experts here at the department on that topic. But it's also an opportunity to learn more about CalPEST, which is the California Pesticide Electronic Submission Tracking project that we're working on here at DPR. This will be a fully integrated information management system to substantially improve the pesticide product registration process, and you'll hear more details about that. I think that we've made some substantial improvements over the last year and a half or so when it comes to the registration process here at DPR. We've hired some additional scientists. We've sought to streamline the registration process. And I think that CalPEST will be a great way for us to really develop and further implement some of these registration efficiencies that we've gained. And you'll hear more about that in the hours to come. So Karen, I'll turn it back over to you. And again, thanks everybody for joining us today.
Thanks, Val. So what we'll be covering today is an overview of our registration program overall, and then we'll go through our registration fee history as well as our projected revenues and expenditures for the next 5 years. We'll have a presentation on options that we're considering around the registration fees to support both the CalPEST project as well as other cost burdens to the program, and then we'll open it up for discussion and close with a little bit of next steps. I'll reiterate this at the end of the presentation, but just want to say that we do have an open comment period through April 19th. So while we hope to hear a lot of discussion at today's webinar, there will be additional opportunities to provide feedback through mid-April that we'll be using as a part of our decision-making process on this. And so with that, I will turn the presentation over to Tulio Macedo to start with an overview of our pesticide registration program.
Thank you, Karen. First, I would like to, on behalf of the staff that is working on this project, to thank everybody who is attending and for your participation in this webinar. We really appreciate that. So today I'm going to give you a brief and a high-level overview of the pesticide registration program. So, and I would like to start sharing with you our mission, the department's mission statement. That is to protect human health and environment by regulating pesticides use, sales and use, and by fostering reduced risk pest management. I would like to highlight that the pesticide registration branch plays a key role on contributing into this mission, since one knows that before a pesticide can be used or sold in California, the product has to go through the registration process, which guarantees or ensures that the pesticide used is efficacious and is there potentially no adverse effects to the human health and environment when used in accordance to the accepted label. The pesticide registration branch for these activities contributes to overall program critical roles, which includes to provide for proper, safe, and efficient use of pesticides essential for the production of food, fiber, and for protection of public health, to protect the environment from harmful pesticides by prohibiting, regulating, or ensuring proper stewardship of pesticides. Also to ensure agricultural and pest control workers have safe working conditions where pesticides are present, and to ensure pesticides are properly labeled and the information disseminated is consistent with registration registered uses. The pesticide registration budget covers a broad scope of registration activities, including some of the activities outside the pesticide registration branch, which include but not limited to processing of submissions of applications for registration of new pesticide products, including new active ingredients, processing requests to amend currently registered pesticide products, applications for renewal of pesticide licenses, scientific and technical evaluation of all registration types, which may include multiple branches. We also process special local needs or SLNs registrations. We do process as well emergency exemptions from registration, Section 18s. We process adverse effects submissions, minimum risk pesticide products, and other product review research reviews. We process research authorizations. We do administrative tasks associated with reevaluation, risk assessment, and risk mitigation. We do process Public Records Act requests. We do have a ombudsman, and we do also have administrative functions such as mail intake, scientific study indexing, label coding, pesticide data maintenance and storage, and licensing. And we do also are involved with the general administrative and facility support, such as accounting, information technology, and human resources. Now I wanted to share with you some of our statistics on our registration branch. And as you can see, that is a busy table, and we cover all types of submissions associated with the registration process. And we are sharing with you some numbers from 2015 to 2020. I'm not gonna go through every single number, otherwise we stay here till noon. So I'm gonna just provide you with some averages. So the span of 2015, 2020, we received an average of over 1,400 submissions for new products, 2,500 submissions for label amendments, 37 for new products containing new active ingredients. We processed or received submissions for 12,616 product renewals. So that's a lot. We processed or received 44 submissions for 24Cs or special local needs, 10 Section 18 emergent exemptions submissions, 782 submissions for research authorization, and 531 submissions for diverse effects. So again, those are averages. And in the total, we handle over 17,000 submissions on an average from 2015 to 2020.
Tulio, you're muted.
I know that it seems a lot. It is a lot. And I think that the main concern is our timeframes. We, as a program overall, we are very aware of our timeframes. Currently, timeframes is not meeting industry expectations or need. For matter of fact, it's not meeting even our own expectations. We wanted to process those submissions as fast as we can, so make those products available in the market as fast as we can. In an average, a submission for a new product is taking us 120 days. And for a label amendment, it's taking us approximately, in an average, 80 days. I know that those numbers can vary a lot by submission. And there's a number of factors that might affect our ability to process a submission. So with that in mind, once we have the factors that we consider that we have control, we are trying to implement or come up with strategies to improve our processes. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we are working on is to update our registration branch processes, policies, and procedures with the goal of streamlining and improving our consistency and efficiency. We are in the process of updating our desk manual, so those changes in our processes are documented, so it's available, easily accessed to our regulatory scientists. We are creating a checklist or SOPs for all processes associated with our registration process. Again, the goal is to make that consistent across our staff. We created job aids for supervisors and managers, so people who make decision makers, they're all looking for or looking at the same thing and making the same decisions. So we are also creating a consistent decision-making within our branch. We scanned historic evaluation reports for easy access and use. And right now we are in the process of developing ways to make those files accessible, not only for our internal pesticide registration staff, but to other branches as well that are involved with our evaluation or registration program. We revised our monthly regulatory staff meetings. Now all managers and supervisors are in attendance in order to share our learning experiences and foster consistencies. Those meetings, we are also discussing ways to improve our processes, and a lot of good ideas are coming out of those meetings, and we are trying to develop and put it in place. We are in the process of fine-tuning our evaluation and routing criteria. The goal is to prevent unnecessary routing. And we are also implementing an evaluation consultation process. So again, to promote efficient bridging, and so therefore avoiding unnecessary routing. Those two items by themselves, I believe and expect that will have a huge impact on our timeframes, because if we are more efficient in identifying already revised or reviewed data that we have in-house, that will prevent us to unnecessarily routing. So it's not going to be spending time in any evaluation station. We will not have to have a public report developed, and we will not have to wait 30 days to finalize that decision. So those two things will, I believe, will improve our timeline significantly. Also, we are reviewing and revising registration regulations. We are not removing, we are not creating new requirements. We are just clarifying the language of these requirements and also eliminate redundancies. Our goal is to make it easily understandable. And so once one look at that regulation, it will be easier to understand what our regulations are. We are also assigning California-only registration numbers upfront. A few years back, we would have to wait for the entire registration evaluation process to take place, and then we would issue a California-only registration number, which potentially would delay our final decision and putting that product in the market. Now we are doing that upfront, so we are preventing that potential delay. We have implemented for a few years now the training program for new regulatory scientists. Again, we are seeking consistency across. So, and we are seeing results that we are very happy about it. We have improved our internal tracking of conditional registrations. That allows us to be easier for us to look at our databases and identify products that are conditionally registered, why they're conditionally registered, when those conditions are about to expire. That allows us to be more proactive, reaching out to the registrant, reminding them, hey, you need to submit us your report, or in order to renew a product or to remove those conditions from your product. Another thing that we are working hard on it is to clean our chemical information databases. So we are trying to consolidate synonyms, reduce duplication, improve our searchability, not only for internal users, but as well for external users as well. So coming months, you'll see an improve on our ability to search products using our databases. I'd like to point out that some of these initiatives or strategies are still in development. Some are right on the point to deploy and make effective. So I expect that you will see some great significant results in the coming months. But the one that we are, again, there are some that are short-term and on the long-term, and one of the long-term ones that we are very excited, and you're gonna hear from Clint shortly, is that the CalPEST project. Some of those initiatives and strategies that we are trying to implement will all in preparation to the CalPEST, and that will be already heavy staff familiar with some processes that will be done through CalPEST. So we are very excited, and hopefully we will have a significant impact on our timelines. With that, I'll pass the torch to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tulio, and good morning, everyone. DPR is working with control agencies, including the California Department of Technology, the Department of Finance, and the legislature, to seek approval of the increased project costs for the California Pesticide Submission Tracking System, or CalPEST. DPR is currently collaborating with control agencies for the approval of $5 million for fiscal year 2021-22. The $5 million in project funding will support the following activities: funding of required oversight services, including listing the Department of Technology's statewide technology procurement to oversee the procurement of a system integration vendor and the system integrator itself. Department of Technology's independent project oversight, and independent verification and validation services, which is required by the Department of Technology due to the CalPEST project's size and complexity. Project management vendor services, and necessary hardware, software, and licensing purchases. The total project cost is now anticipated at $22.7 million. However, this projected project cost is more than the total cost to the registrants, as some of the budget items that DPR is required to track and report to control agencies are costs that DPR would incur regardless as part of normal operating expenditures, such as state staff. DPR will also be recruiting 3 limited term positions during the project to support the team working on CalPEST. This will allow the core team members to remain committed to the project without having to balance competing work priorities and ensure that PRB has the necessary resources to maintain critical program functions. The main project benefits for CalPEST include the ability to submit registration applications and data electronically. As registrants currently submit many types of hard copy documents to DPR for review and evaluation, PRB staff must manually enter, store, track, and route this data. Handling hard copy documents makes it more difficult for PRB staff to find information, can create inefficiencies in the registration process, and requires staff to route large volumes of paper to support program activities. Transitioning to accepting electronic submissions will lead to great strides in streamlining registration efforts. Note that PRB will also still be accepting paper submissions after CalPEST go live. In addition to checks, PRB will also begin accepting electronic payments, including electronic funds transfer or EFT and online credit card. Electronic payments allow for near instantaneous payment processing and the ability to receive a receipt, which will lead to increased efficiencies in the registration process. CalPEST will allow for all of PRB and other DPR staff involved in the registration process to evaluate labels electronically, as well as provide public access to electronic labels. Reviewing electronic labels will allow DPR staff to more efficiently review proposed labels with current or other versions of accepted labels by leveraging document comparison technology rather than manual visual review. Electronic labels will also eliminate lost or missing labels from submission packages, allow for concurrent review of labels by multiple staff at the same time, and once registered, allow registrants, government agencies, poison control centers, growers, consumers, enforcement or compliance field personnel, and other stakeholders to search, view, print, and download current and historical labels online. In addition to electronic payment options and labels, CalPEST will further streamline the evaluation process by allowing for concurrent evaluation by multiple workstations where feasible, as opposed to sequentially. Lastly, the transition to accepting electronic submissions will greatly reduce paper use and storage costs. This will result in a more eco-friendly business process, reduce ongoing operating expenses for the storage of paper documents, and increase the efficiency of physical office space. To help ensure project success, DPR is working with control agencies to adopt a new procurement approach, as well as an iterative method of building the system. DPR is currently developing the solicitation package for the vendor community with a target release in mid-2021. The new procurement approach will allow DPR to work with prospective vendors to build a small subset of features to ensure that their understanding of DPR's requirements are in alignment and establish a collaborative working relationship. Following this test run period with the vendors, DPR will be seeking to select a vendor in late 2021. Once a vendor is awarded the contract, DPR will work with the vendor to incrementally implement new features over the life of the project. The benefits of this approach will introduce enhanced business and end user value earlier in the project and reduce risk by developing the system in smaller pieces as opposed to all at once. DPR is targeting to build CalPEST from 2022 through 2024, with a fully implemented system sometime in 2024. In closing, I also want to note that these projected dates are dependent on control agencies and budget approvals, and receiving compliant bids from vendors that meet all of DPR's requirements. And now, Karen will be discussing the registration fee history. Thank you.
Thanks, Clint. I want to continue to encourage folks to put questions in the Q&A, and looking forward to digging into those at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to transition into a discussion of our registration fees, both history and what we're looking at moving forward as a part of this project and other associated fees for the branch. So DPR overall is supported by a number of different funding sources. The bulk of our funds come from a mill assessment, which is levied on the sales of pesticides and is currently set at a flat 2.1 cents per dollar sold of pesticides. This in 1920 accounted for 80% of the revenues collected by the department. The second largest source of revenue is our registration fees, which covers our new product submission fees, as well as the annual registration and renewal and our amendment fees. And this is currently 15% of our budget. We also receive about $2.5 million in licensing fees, which supports our licensing exams and continuing education oversight. And then we have our remaining funds are supported from civil penalties, cannabis tax fund, and other miscellaneous revenue sources. The focus of our webinar today is going to be on the registration portion of this pie. And so we'll be digging a little bit further into this. So our registration fees were established in a state law passed in 2003, which allowed DPR to set fees to cover the costs of our registration activities and have that as a self-supported program within the department. And as such, DPR has broad authority to adjust those fees and set the fee schedule to ensure that our program costs are fully covered. This is detailed in Food and Ag Code section 12812, which specifies that our registration fees shall include, but are not limited to, the following. Let me go to the next slide, thank you. Annual fees for each product submitted for registration, penalties for the late payment of registration fees, and fees for amendments to register products. And per statute, these fees shall be set so that the total revenue collected for each fiscal year is sufficient to support the expenditure levels for the registration program contained in the Annual Budget Act. So since this statute was enacted, we have periodically adjusted the registration fees in order to cover program costs. This was done in 2004 and in 2015. So when we raised fees in 2015, the program had been running a mild deficit at that point for 4 years relative to our collected revenues versus expenditures. And we also projected significant additional expenses based on both employee compensation and our first pass at looking at an electronic registration system. And so as a result, in 2015, our fees changed from $750 to $1,150 for registration and annual renewal. And we amended our label amendment fees from $100 for certain label amendments to a flat $25 amendment fee for all amendments and notifications. And so if we look at the impacts for this over the course of the last 5 years, our revenues have been more or less stable over the last 5 years, but we've seen significant growth in our expenditures over the last 5 years, particularly starting in 2017-18. And if we look at this graphically, you can see again that our expenditures have grown significantly, and that over the last 2 years, we've actually settled back into a net program deficit for our registration program, where our expenditures are exceeding revenues. So I want to talk a little bit about what's been driving the expenditures and how that's similar and how that's also different from some of the costs that we talked about back in 2015. A large portion of the expenditure increase that we've seen has been driven by baseline budget adjustments. This accounts for about $3.9 million annually in additional cost burden to the fund. And this is driven by increases in employee compensation and retirement adjustments. And these are made to budgets statewide in order to maintain the current level of service. We've also seen additional expansions in the level of service through budget change proposals, or BCPs, as well as legislative augmentations. And the cost of these changes are currently amounting to $1.6 million annually. This includes a number of positions that we added as a part of our expanded public reporting and notice of decision process, as well as positions to support pollinator protection, in IT security, and cannabis. And so looking forward at our projected expenditures and revenues, we are looking at additional program costs in future years. So as several people have mentioned, as I think most of the folks on this webinar are aware, we are currently proposing a BCP to relaunch the electronic tracking system for registration submissions and have a BCP that's currently for consideration for $5 million for this current year. The current requirements for IT projects will require us to go back for additional BCPs in future years to continue support for that project. And so we expect to have several one-time BCPs over the next 3 years, and then ongoing program costs to support that system in perpetuity. We're also anticipating additional changes to employee compensation and retirement adjustments. And these are the current projected numbers, although these could change as bargaining agreements and other changes are made to the state system. We're also looking at additional support, additional pressures on the fund relative to a general fund loan repayment. This was a loan that was made several years ago that the general fund is now seeking to recoup costs for. And so we are working to repay that loan out of all of our programs. This reflects the cost to that loan from the registration program specifically. We also have additional cost pressures for our pro rata payments, which are statewide general and administrative costs that are assessed for all of the departments to support state oversight agencies. And so this is accounting, and these last 2 points are as high as $1.5 million just in the general fund loan repayment and pro rata costs. So if we look at then how this overlays with our projected revenues, we're seeing that these costs are driving significant deficits in the registration program if we leave our fees unchanged. If we could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. With deficits as high as $7 million annually and then trailing to $3 million in 2025-26. And again, showing this graphically for those of you who do better with graphics as opposed to just the numbers on the screen. And so what we're finding as a result of these proposals, as well as general costs to the department, that our registration fee revenues do not fully support the registration program expenditures. And that this has already been the case for 2 years where our expenditures are exceeding revenues, and that we are projecting that this deficit will continue to grow in coming years. And so to that end, we are looking to propose to increase our fees in order to help support the costs to the registration program. And so I want to talk about now our options of what we're looking at considering for the fees. These were included as a part of the California notice that was sent out about a week and a half ago. So this should be consistent information with what you've already seen and hopefully have had a chance to review. So again, our current fees are set at $1,150 for renewal or new registration, and then a flat $25 fee for all label amendments and notifications. We also assess a late penalty fee of 20% that's charged for our renewal process. These fees were based on the best available data that we had in 2014 when the fees were increased. And what we've seen as a part of the current fee schedule is that the bulk of our revenues, so over 99% of our revenues, come from the application and renewal fee revenues. The current label amendment and notification revenues account for a very, very small portion of our total fees. We also do not assess any fees on other registration activities, including Section 18s, SLNs, and research authorization. So as we're considering the proposed fees moving forward, there were a number of factors that we wanted to take into account in guiding our thinking on the development of the fees. The first was to consider, are the fees broadly based? Are they sufficiently distributed across affected parties relative to the services that they're looking at within the department? We also asked, are the fees economically neutral? Would the fees influence a registrant's decision to register a pesticide product? And this is particularly important as we're very interested in maintaining a broad toolbox for pest management and don't want to discourage the introduction of newer chemistries into the state. We also considered the administrative feasibility of the fee structure. Can the fees be administered and collected in an efficient, effective, and uniform manner with minimal compliance and enforcement costs? We want to minimize the amount of time we're spending considering fees and really focusing on the other evaluation and processing of the registrations within the program. We also want a fee structure that's stable and reliable so that we have stable revenues to support the registration program moving forward. So to that end, we have 4 scenarios that we've proposed. These are variations on a theme, and so I'll walk through each of these. The first column shown in gray, again, is our current fee schedule for comparison. And in all 4 scenarios, we are looking to maintain the current flat $25 fee for amendments to labels. Scenario 1 is a same magnitude increase for both the application fee and renewal fees to $1,500. Scenario 2 would maintain the current $1,150 application fee and have a slightly higher renewal fee in order to help offset that lower cost for application fees. Scenarios 3 and 4 are the reverse, where we have lower increases to our renewal fee and higher increases to our application fee. So in scenario 3, our application fee we're proposing at $2,700 and a renewal fee of $1,400. And in scenario 4, we're proposing an application fee of $4,750 and a renewal fee of $1,200. In total, all of these scenarios are raising roughly the same amount of projected revenue, about $20.6 million annually above our current $15.8 million. And so what this looks like relative to our projected expenses is that we're looking to ameliorate the costs over the next 5 years in terms of what we're anticipating for fee pressures and expense pressures on the department. So you can see that in the first couple of years, our expenditures will be higher than what we're proposing to collect as a part of the fees, and that these will roughly equal out over the course of the development and implementation of CalPEST and take into account other fee pressures, other cost pressures on the department. And so going forward, these proposed scenarios are designed to address our projected registration fund imbalance relative to our current fee baseline. We also plan to reevaluate our fees once CalPEST is complete to determine whether or not they are appropriately supporting the program and to periodically reevaluate thereafter to reflect other cost increases or decreases to the department. And our general rule of thumb is that we would consider making adjustments if the disparities between revenues and costs are greater than about 10%. And so we have some particular points of feedback that we're seeking for today. First and foremost is which of the 4 proposed fee scenarios would you support the most? We'd also be interested in hearing if there are registration functions for which DPR should be charging that we currently are not. And if you have perspectives on what would be the best threshold for evaluating the need for a fee adjustment. We do welcome stakeholder feedback both today as well as in writing after the webinar if you need some additional time to think and look at how this might impact your current business practices. I do want to mention that comments should be specific to the registration fees. I want to acknowledge that we have another major fee proposal that's currently in general public discussion, but that we're not here today to talk about mill. We're here to talk about the registration fees. Also want to mention that we have a number of staff available to provide responses to questions about information covered in the presentation. So hopefully we'll be able to cover your questions today. And if not, we're happy to follow up with additional detail moving forward. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Richard to kind of reiterate how we're going to go through Q&A and to help moderate our Q&A portion. Thank you again so much for being here and looking forward to getting into the discussion.
All right, thank you again all for all of your presentations. Now we'll have, as Karen said, the time to answer any questions that you may have. Just as a reminder for Zoom attendees, you can interact with the presenters through several different ways. To ask a question, you can use one of the three options. The first method is to type your question using the Q&A box within Zoom. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom window. The second is when if we ask if anyone has verbal comments, you can use the raise hand button within Zoom. And lastly, if you're watching through the Cal EPA site, we'll be able to take questions via the reg fees at the CDPR email address. That's regfees, REGFEES at cdpr.ca.gov. Anyone watching through the Cal EPA broadcast instead of Zoom, please submit your questions through the regfees email address. I do want to bring to your attention for those watching in the meeting through the Cal EPA webcast, there is a 1 to 2 minute delay. That is why that we're reading the regfees email questions last. This allows for a few moments for the emails to catch up with the delay. If an emailed question is not addressed during our meeting, your question will be addressed afterwards via email. Again, please do not use the chat function in Zoom to ask any questions. The questions will be addressed in the following order: the Q&A box, raised hand, and the email. Sarah, do we have any questions via the Q&A?
Yes, Richard, I'm going to read the first question, okay?
Sounds great.
On Tulio's slide of registration statistics, can you break out by ag versus non-ag like Fed EPA does for PREA actions?
Yeah, that's a good point. Not at this time. I don't have that on my fingertips, but for sure I can follow up on that and make that available. So just send us a email for the reg fees and email, and we will provide the response.
And I'll just add to that roughly half of our products are non-ag. I would say some of these product categories will likely skew more ag. So for example, we tend to see more ag focused SLNs than we do for non-ag applications, but we can follow up with some specific information there. And if we can move to the next slide, please. Thank you.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to add to that, as you might all be very well aware, we receive a number of non-ag type of emissions, including antimicrobials for related to the COVID. So in 2020, we got a significant number. So, but we can break those up down and provide that information through our email.
Sarah, next question.
This next question is from Joe. It says, please advise if CalPEST system will integrate already available submission system All-Star.
So I'm wondering, Shelley, if you can provide some additional, or perhaps Clint.
Yes, no, not at this time. However, that may be something that could be considered for a potential future enhancement of the CalPEST system.
This is something that we are taking a look at, is compatibility with other systems and what systems are in place with other states. I will mention that the particular needs that we have for the data review that's required for submission in California isn't always compatible with some of the systems that are in place elsewhere, but we are taking a look at that to try to provide as much consistency as is feasible.
Next question.
This is from an anonymous attendee. It says, is there a way to accelerate CalPEST? 3 years is a long time to wait for this. Can we at least enact e-payment now? Cal EPA accepts e-pay for mill and carb right now.
Thanks for the question. And I know this is something that's of pretty significant interest to a lot of folks and frankly, something that we're really interested in doing. We are hoping the e-payment will, I'm going to take a step back. One of the elements that we're looking at doing as a part of the CalPEST development is having smaller features coming out sooner than 2024. And so we are hoping for e-payment to be closer to the 2022 end than 2024. We know that there's a tremendous benefit both for the registrants as well as for the department as a part of that. And so we expect that that will be one of the earlier features that comes out. And Clint, if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, Karen, I think you did a great job. I'll just note that that is one of the main benefits to moving forward with this iterative development approach. Is it really allows the project team to select the feature sets that are going to provide the most value to stakeholders.
Thank you, Clint. Sarah, next question.
This is again from an anonymous attendee. It says, Fed EPA has a full e-submission and e-payment system. Do we really have to invent from scratch?
So I think this gets to the question that was asked earlier about system compatibility and what's necessary. You know, the EPA system is designed for the IT and process needs for EPA, and that there are certain requirements around systems talking to each other that may not be fully possible here. Clint or Shelley, if there's anything you want to add to this.
I believe that DPR is open to considering any options that are presented from the vendor community through the competitive bidding process, as long as it meets all of DPR's requirements.
Thank you. Sarah, next question.
This question is from Sam Robinson. It says, what guarantee is there that meal tax and registration fees aren't sent into the general fund and only some return to the agency via budget appropriations?
Thanks for the question. So we have very specific appropriations as a part of both the budget bill as well as our statutory obligations for the fees that are collected through all of our fee programs to be used specifically for the pesticide programs. I'll open this up to Leslie if you want to add anything else. Leslie Ford, who's our budget chief, to talk about any additional information on accountability relative to fees in our budget.
Hi, so as Karen mentioned, these fees go specifically into the DPR fund, and then those fees are available to help us support the department's programs. As far as the guarantee that it doesn't go to the general fund, it doesn't go to the general fund. It's there to support our program. So there shouldn't be any issue with fees being transferred to the general fund, except to pay for this loan that we mentioned earlier. That portion of fee increases do need to repay a general fund loan. So.
Thank you, Leslie. Sarah, next question.
This question is from Artie. It says, I really appreciate Tulio sharing what the average time for a new product registration is, 120 days. I am sure that it is an accurate number as stated. Thanks. For a little more granularity, what is the average time frame and or range of timeframes for new product registrations that have new active ingredients or significant new uses or contain a new biopesticide active ingredient or new antimicrobial products?
Hi, Ari, thank you for the question. Yes, for the new active products containing new active ingredients, the average is around 650 days. and that, of course, can vary a lot depending on the type of pesticide we are looking at. Like, for example, if it is a biopesticide, or if it is a conventional pesticide. So I don't have the breakdowns on biopesticides and antimicrobials by itself. Again, we can try to do our research and break those down to you and send it to you. But an average, a new active ingredient containing product takes about 650 days.
Thank you, Tulio. Sarah, next question.
This question is from Bill Aluid. Can you explain how or if you take into account economic impacts on the payers of the fees in addition to the fiscal needs of the department?
Great, thanks for the question. Our statutory requirement is to consider the fiscal needs of the department. What we're hoping to capture as a part of this discussion, as well as additional feedback provided after the webinar, is what the impacts would be to the fee payers to help guide our decision about what fee schedule is going to be the most feasible for registrants, as well as meeting the fiscal needs of the department.
Thank you, Karen. Sarah, next question.
I'll go ahead and read it since I'm not sure quite what happened with the sound there, but this is from Anna Casanova, and the question is, when does DPR anticipate the increase to take place? It's going to get into this in next steps, but happy to talk about it now. We are, so under our authorities, we have the ability to increase or change our fees through emergency regulations. And so we are planning to notice those emergency regulations in August, with the fees to be effective in September prior to the annual renewals.
Thank you, Karen. Sarah, are you back? All right. Is there, I'll read it. This is from CZE Manic. Is there a place or way to obtain information on what the CalPEST system will work?
And I'll defer to Clint or to Shelly Lopez, who is in our registration branch, to talk about some additional locations where this information is available.
So from a control agency perspective, CDT, the California Department of Technology, does publish the most up-to-date project reports on their website under the project tracking section.
And maybe if we can provide a link to where some of that information is, Clint, I don't know if you have that on hand, but there is information posted. I should say that we've also, about a year ago, engaged in a request for information where we were looking to talk about scope and program costs for the project. And so there is information that's available on this, and we can work to point folks to that.
Thank you, Karen. Susan Lofton asks, please explain why there are 4 scenarios for the fees. What is the purpose of this?
So our goal here was to provide some options to consider of what we could see as being feasible scenarios moving forward.
Tim Shestek asks, thank you for the presentation. The CalPEST BCP states the projected project cost has increased from 6.9 million to nearly 22.7 million. Can you please provide some additional detail as to why the costs have increased so substantially? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Tim, for the question. I'm going to have Clint or Shelly start with a discussion of this.
Yes, so Department of Technology requires that we track all project costs through the entire life cycle of the project. Because of the increased duration, that has led to additional fiscal years that we had to account for state staff resources. Also, we went back out for a RFI, as Karen had mentioned earlier. And part of this RFI, we were able to provide refined requirements and updated user stories that help the vendor community come up with a more robust estimate for what it would take to implement. So as a result of the RFI responses, the system integration vendor projected costs did increase.
Thank you, Clint. Susan Lofton asks, when would the fee increases be implemented?
And again, we're looking to implement these in September.
Thank you. Nicole Quinones asks, on slide 23 spoke to the increased cost of the registration department. Apart from the expanded notification process, which is clearly registration related, how come the other expenditures in the 1.6 million category come out of registration fees, such as pollinator health and cannabis related costs, which appears to have its own revenue stream?
Great, thanks, Nicole. So the cost for the expanded notification process is about $1.1 million. So that's the primary chunk of those additional expenditures are coming from that. The additional federal pollinator mandate is we received a position in registration to be reviewing pollinator data, and we also have positions in enforcement associated with that. So the pollinator health is specific to registration activities relative to pollinator health. It's not covering the entire expansion of those costs. The cannabis related position is in support of AB 243, the medical marijuana law. And so the funding is a little bit different than the overall cannabis legalization, which has its own funding source. The IT positions, these are distributed costs throughout the department. So because our IT branch supports all of the functions within the department, we allocate costs to each of the branches to support the portion of staffing that's housed within each of those branches. And Leslie, if there's anything you wanted to add to that. No? Okay.
Thank you. One of our attendees asks, after you select a vendor, will you be looking for registrants to use the system to test it out?
Yes, we will be. So as I mentioned, we are looking at an iterative release schedule. And so we're trying to figure out kind of functionally how this looks, but please expect to hear more information from this about how to get engaged. You know, we've, as a part of the development of this over the last many years, have had numerous conversations with registrants about needs, about priorities. We want to make sure that the system is functional and workable both for us, but also for the registrant community. And so, yes, this will absolutely be something that we're looking at.
Thank you. Another anonymous attendee asks, how does CalPEST work in regards to the statement that only a representative label shall be submitted when nothing changes except for size and coverage in case of granule, and only additional labels submitted if the DFU, environment, etc. differ?
So I will defer this question maybe to Shelley Lopez, who's one of our program managers in the registration branch.
Hi, good morning. So sure, if I understand the question correctly, the registration process will not change due to CalPEST. We will still be requiring labels to be submitted for each product that's registered. So CalPEST will incorporate each label that comes in and we'll run it through our registration process. Not quite sure if I got the full intent of that question, but yeah, CalPEST is not going to change the process itself.
Thank you, Shelley. Brandy O asks, 650 days for what process?
For the registration of a pesticide containing a new active ingredient. So it's from when we receive it all the way to when we will finally issue a registration license. Again, I wanted to remind that is an average, correct? So you're going to have products that we can do faster and products that we can do take longer because of the complexity and a number of other factors that are under our control and some are out of our control. So for example, some things out of our control is sometimes we have to wait for EPA to finish their process, registration process, so we can finalize ours. So the 650 days is for products containing new AI or new active ingredient.
Thank you, Tulio. Nicole Quinones asks, does scenario 4 best represent the amount of work associated with each type of registration? Is there a reason the fee for amendments is not proposed to be increased in any of the scenarios?
Thanks. So I would say scenario 4 gets more toward the relative workload, but no, it does not take into account the amount of work associated with each type of registration. Our process ameliorizes the initial cost of registration over the lifespan of the product as a part of the renewal fees. In terms of your question on fee amendments, this was a point of great discussion back and forth in developing this proposal, and in the end decided to keep the amendment fees the same. As I mentioned, this is a fairly small portion of our overall revenue, so increases to the amendment fees didn't substantially alter what we were proposing for the registration or renewal fees, and so decided to keep them constant.
Thank you, Karen. Renee asks, Tulio discussed that the CalPEST program will make approval times faster. Faster is a relative term. Can you define what faster means?
Thanks for the question, Renee. And just for an example right now, with the paper-based process, it takes approximately 5 to 7 days just to process, to the submission go through the intaking process, which means we have to open the envelope, look at the submission, and put that into our system, our tracking system. With the CalPEST project, that would take hours instead of days. So the overall process will be faster. It does not mean the evaluation process of the data will be faster. The information will become available for the evaluators in a faster mode because that is electronically, they will receive all the information at the same time. But evaluation itself, evaluation of data is evaluation of data, either if it is paper-based or electronic-based. But our processes throughout the registration process, we expect to be much faster than it is right now with a paper base. And Shelley, please, Shelley is our representative of the program within CalPEST project. So Shelley, if you want to add anything on that.
I think, Julio, I think you covered that very well. One other point I just wanted to add is just that because the data will be available to everyone at the same time, we can do evaluations concurrently. And I think that will be, in the long run, a huge increase in the streamline ability of our system and of our process.
Thank you to Tulio and Shelley. One of our attendees asks, will the increases fund the hire of new staff such as ecotoxicology?
So the current proposal does not have any staff for evaluation of registration packages. We are looking to propose having permanent staff to support the system overall, both in IT as well as in our registration branch. But at this time, we're not proposing any expansions to the evaluation stations.
Thank you, Karen. Renee asks, will the registration fees be lowered once CalPEST program is fully implemented?
We will be reevaluating the fees when the CalPEST program is fully implemented. We will need to look at if there's been other funding pressures to the department in that intervening time before we make that determination.
Thank you. Hal Ambulator asks, is CalDPR open to a PRIA type system to provide more predictable timelines for registrants?
Thanks, Hal. And I see a couple of these questions coming through the Q&A, so I'll answer this once and then we can have further discussions on it. At this time, we're not proposing a PRIA type system. We are happy to talk about what that might look like, but one of the elements that we're really considering and wanting to look at here is administrative feasibility and stability for us as a department. And so we would need to learn more about what that might look like, how that's working federally before we propose to adopt anything like that within California. Also mentioned that we have certain requirements for our environmental review and assessments that we would really want to have a deeper conversation about what that would look like before getting into that.
Renee asks, what happens to registrant fees if the program is not implemented due to issues like the last attempt? Will there be a return of fees to the registrants?
Well, I will say that we are doing everything we can to make sure that this system is successful moving forward. This has been one of the major efforts within the department and is a commitment that we've been looking at throughout the organization to make sure that we are having a successful program moving forward. What we are doing as a part of this proposal, and this isn't exactly your question, Renee, but getting around this question, is that we did apply some of the fees that were collected previously and thinking about how high do we need to raise fees currently to support the program. So there is some carryover of fees that have already been paid. So I think it's in this worst case scenario, which again, we're putting a lot of effort into making sure it doesn't happen, it's more likely that we would consider how to apply those fees moving forward than issue refunds.
Thank you, Karen. One of our attendee asks, is there an option to increase the initial registration and renewals and not pay any mill tax?
So the mill tax is a required fee in statute. So that is a requirement that currently exists. If the question is, can we move forward with the registration fees and not move ahead with the broader mill proposal? The mill supports a wide range of our functions within the department, and there are a lot of priorities that are happening there. I would defer any additional discussion on the mill proposal that we have currently in place to a different venue, but these support different functions within the department. And so we are looking at how to address both of these issues moving forward relative to our registration program, and then also to our department function overall.
Thank you. Stacy Hardis asks, will the timeframes be posted that were not answered by Tulio, i.e. significant new use on a product, new biopesticide AI, or new antimicrobial?
Okay, so what I'm proposing is to hold the people that ask those questions to submit that in writing on our registration fee email, and we will provide it. As far as posting, we can consider that as a general, and some of these numbers are already available on our BCP that is published. But yes, we will discuss it and provide those numbers. again, I just wanted to make sure that these people understand that numbers without context are a dangerous thing because some of these numbers might appear very high or very low. But if you don't know what's the factors involved on those numbers, I just wanted to point that out. But yes, we will discuss and consider how we're going to provide those numbers to the general public.
And Stacy, you can email that question to regfees@cdpr.ca.gov, and we will answer those. Another attendee asks, what will be the process to define what of the 4 scenarios will be adopted?
So we're looking to take feedback from today's webinar, as well as any additional comments that are submitted in writing to help define which of those scenarios we adopt. The decision-making process will be detailed as a part of the rulemaking that we enter into later in the summer.
Another one of our attendees asks, how is the 120-day current approval timing determined? I have been experiencing longer than that on timing on amendments, notifications, and new registrations, which are not involving new active ingredients.
Yeah, so once the submission is received, that is entering our tracking system. So we can follow up the life of that package or that submission throughout while we're still here in the registration process. So we can see when the submission was received and when submission was, a final action was taken associated with that submission. So that time span, we keep track of that. So that's how we generate those numbers. Again, I'm sorry if you are experiencing longer times than I state here, but again, I want to remind everybody that is the average. So certain submissions take longer. Some submissions, like label amendments, they do have to go for complex scientific review, and is almost the same time frame for some of our new pesticide registrations. So yeah, it all depends on the type, the complexity of your submission.
Thank you.
But if you have any particular or specific concerns, please don't hesitate to share with us and we will look into that.
Thank you, Tulio. Another of our attendees asks, in determining which scenario gets improved, how much weight is given to registrant feedback?
Significant weight. I mean, this is a large reason why we wanted to have this discussion, to walk through our thinking behind the proposals. And again, we're looking for something that supports the functions of the department, but that is also workable for registrants.
Thank you, Karen. Nicole Quinones asks, is there any information on how much of the fee increases from 2015 was spent on trying to develop the electronic registration process? Excuse me, electronic registration program?
Okay, thanks, Nicole. So we spent $2.1 million on that system, which includes both the contract that was terminated as well as additional vendors that we had to hire, including a system integrator, oversight that's provided by an independent vendor as well as by CDT.
Another one of our attendees asks, does the 650 days apply to even products with new AI submitted concurrently with US EPA?
Yes, all new AI containing pesticide registration submissions are done concurrently with the federal EPA. So that accounts for that. Again, from the time we receive to the time we issue the license. If anybody out there is not submitting new AI containing pesticides concurrently with EPA, do so, because we do process them concurrently with EPA.
Thank you, Tulio. Another one of our attendees asks, have you thought about adjusting the registration fees based on company sales? similar to what is done with mill assessments? If so, why did you decide against this?
It's a good question. I think this gets to the intent of what the fees are aiming to cover. So the mill assessment covers our general program expenses, a lot of which are related to the use of products and the amount of use of products. Versus our registration program, we provide the same level of review to products regardless of how much is ultimately sold. A label is a label is a label. And that while they may require different kinds of review depending on which stations, the first time an AI is coming in, we would be looking at the same categories and factors regardless of how much of that is ultimately sold.
And to add to that, Karen, not once we receive a submission for pesticide registration, we don't know how much of that product will be sold or even sold in California. Some of the submissions, like for example, master labels, they are not for sale in California. So it would be very difficult for us to come with a way to come to charge for those type of products. So that's one of the reasons we don't do that.
Thank you, Karen and Tulio. Caroline Silvera asks, who exactly is responsible or on team for writing the vendor RFP? Concerned with the previous answer, recompatibility, and it being just up to what the vendor submit. Will it be written into the RFP to require compatibility with existing systems like EPAs? Also, goes to not having the same result as PRDMS?
So Clint and Shelley on our team are heavily involved in writing the vendor RFP. We have a team of 5 or 6 people who are working on this and who are considering impacts both to our current systems as well as impacts elsewhere. Clint or Shelley, is there anything you want to add on to this?
Yes, thank you, Karen. There is representation from both the information technology branch of DPR as well as registration. Also, I will note that the vendors are free to propose their solution for how they would meet all of DPR's requirements. So that is a stipulation of being a compliant bid, is they are not allowed to contradict or omit any requirements that DPR lays out in the solicitation package.
And I just wanted to add to that our staff are utilizing some of the lessons learned from our previous experience in applying to this new round of developing the RFP. And we are not working alone. We have a group of staff from different agencies as oversight helping us with that development. So this is a multi-departmental agency effort to develop and to be successful.
And I also wanted to add that we will, as Karen mentioned earlier, be soliciting feedback from registrants and industry groups.
All right, thank you all. Another one of our attendees asks, DPR has made attempts to have electronic submissions in the past with obviously financial costs and not successful. Is there a guarantee that the new electronic system will be successful? What are the measurements for success in the new proposed system? When will a prototype for the new system be delivered? And when will there be stages of the deliverables?
Thank you. So we're going to try to cover all of the points in this question. I think what we've been reiterating throughout is that we're really committed to making sure that the system works. So just going to run through a few points with this. So one, we've done a robust lessons learned analysis at the end of the previous contract to determine what went well, what didn't go well, and how do we think about improving that in the future. We further refined our requirements to provide specificity on what features are required so that everyone is clear going into the system about what the expectations are for the product and what work product we expect out of this. We've also are adopting a new contracting process, which is relatively new for the state, but maybe familiar to some of you for companies that have been doing this for a while, where we'll be able to review samples of the contractor's work prior to signing a full contract. So we'll have essentially a 60-day trial period where the vendor will work through some of our requirements so that we make sure that it's going to be a good match and that we're all clear on requirements and moving forward. We're also working on having staff that are dedicated to this project as their full-time responsibilities, again, to make sure that we're providing adequate review and feedback to the vendor as this moves forward. We're also continuing to receive quite a bit of oversight, both from CDT, the California Department of Technology, as well as an independent verification and validation consultant who works with us and the vendor to make sure that things are moving through appropriately. And then finally, again, as a part of the new budget change proposal requirements, we will be going back for additional review by the legislature as the project moves forward, which will provide additional oversight and accountability. So I think all of those things in sum, we're looking forward to that being helpful in moving the project forward. Measures of success for a new proposed system is really trying to move to an electronic system that works for us, that works for registrants. I'll hand this over to Shelley and Clint in a moment if you want to talk about some more specifics around there. But a lot of the features that Clint mentioned earlier in terms of having a system that accepts electronic payments, accepts electronic submissions, that we can do joint routing to multiple evaluation stations at the same time to help facilitate our scientific review are all things that we're looking for in the proposed system. In terms of prototype, as I mentioned earlier, we are looking to release this in phases over the course of the next 3 to 4 years, so that we'll have certain features that are coming online sooner than others. And so we're expecting to start seeing product available for registrants to use in 2022. Let's say, Shelley or Clint, is there anything you want to add?
Yes, that we will be working collaboratively with the system integration vendor once a contract is awarded to kind of determine what that roadmap looks like and to deliver the most feedback both for DPR and for external stakeholders as early on in the project as feasible, so that you can start seeing and using this and get the business value out of the system as early as possible.
Thank you. Terry Hall asks, is there one of the scenarios over the others that DPR favors at this time?
I would say that we are relatively agnostic about the scenarios, with probably a slight preference for scenario 1. But we are, again, looking for feedback on which those scenarios make sense and work for registrants, and are very interested in incorporating that feedback into the final proposal.
All right, and as Karen says, we really encourage your feedback. Another one of our attendees asks, will the forthcoming regulation clarifications include any changes for amendments or notifications, such as allowing for more minor changes without submission to DPR?
Not at this time. And Tulio, if you want to add.
No, yeah, as Karen said, that not at this time. Our goal with this time around is just to clarify, clean up the text, and we are not adding or subtracting any of the requirements at this time.
Another one of our attendees asks, how is the fee changes going to be used to improve the station reviews?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, one of the elements that comes as a part of the electronic system is being able to do routing to multiple stations at the same time. So we expect that the parallel reviews will be, at least for some stations, I should say, there will still be orders in which the submissions need to go to certain stations before others, but we are looking to try to parallel reviews where possible. We're also continuing to work on other broader improvements to our registration program, which Tulio kind of outlined at the beginning of the webinar, of kind of administrative and training and documentation changes that we can be making on our end to make sure that we're going through as smoothly as possible.
Yeah, and I wanted to add that, again, the communication between the evaluator, the regulatory scientist, and the company or the registrant, you tend to be faster electronically, because then we can, those submissions can be flagged right away if there is any issues, and all communication will be electronically. So if we asking you for additional documentations, or you don't have to print a hard copy, put in the mail, send it to us, and then we have to go through the intake process. Everything is going to be electronically. So that should improve a lot the timeframes on the review on that aspect alone.
Thank you, Tulio. Michael Miller asks, thank you for this webinar. It has been very formative and is greatly appreciated. In pursuing an electronic registration system, has DPR explored modifying an existing off-the-shelf system already in use by other regulatory agencies? I was away from the webinar briefly. Okay.
Yes, so this is an option that we are considering. So we are not requiring the vendor to build a system from scratch. But what's, I think, of primary interest for us is making sure that the system does meet all of the requirements that we have within the department. And so if there's an ability to do that by modifying an existing system, great, we're very open to that. I think with that, we'll move to the raised hand and then come back to Q&A at the end if there's any additional questions. I know we've had at least one individual who's been patiently waiting.
Yes, at this point, we will be doing the reading aloud of the questions from the raised hand feature. I need to remind you that due to time limitations, we're going to be limiting people to 2 minutes to speak. Asking questions is a two-step process. We will activate your ability to speak, and then on your end, you will need to unmute yourself. Again, due to time limitations, we can only allow 2 minutes for you to ask your questions. Dave Lawson has been very patient, so Dave?
Hello?
Yes.
Great. I didn't know if I needed a microphone or not, but actually, I'd like to restate what other folks have said. I appreciate the time and effort you guys have put into this and the outreach and the way it's laid out. So I actually have two questions and then one kind of observation. So if I could, it's just two real quick ones. On your scenarios 1 through 4, are the number of product registrations held flat, or are they adjusted according to what you think might happen as those fees are increased? Do the product numbers change? That's my first question. My second question is real simple. What's the current DPR reserve? Is it 5%, 10%, what that number might be? And if I could have response to that, then I would make one other comment.
Sure. Thanks, Dave. Yep, that's fine. So in terms of our scenarios, we are using the average number of product registrations over the last 5 years to determine the revenues that we would expect to see under each of the scenarios. As Tulio talked about early on, the average number of submissions, I mean, we do see year-to-year variability, absolutely, but on the whole, they've been fairly stable over the last several years. And so we, at this time, don't expect that the fee changes are going to have major impacts to what we're looking at for products registered. That's one of the factors that we're trying to consider as a proposal that's that raises the revenues necessary, but is also not impacting major changes in business decisions on the part of registrants. But if that's not the case, we'd certainly welcome feedback on that. Relative to your second question about our current reserves, we don't have a mandated reserve that we need to maintain within the DPR fund, but the typical rule of thumb for state agencies is about 3 to 5%. of the total annual operating expense in reserve. And Leslie, if there's anything you want to add on to that.
No, that's correct. And right now I was looking up the percentage of our reserve, but we currently hold a $12 million balance. But mind you, that is many different fee into the DPR fund. So it's not just a reserve for registration fees.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. So my last comment again is, you know, I have huge respect for all of you, and we've worked well together for years and years. But I can't get away without saying one other observation, in that for the CalPEST program, I think a lot of people have been hinting at it, but I know there's more than a handful of us that have gone through this process a few times, like since the mid-1990s, and so we've worked actively with DPR and people within the system, you know, since Toby Jones and Barry Cortez, bless his heart, and now Karen. So not only have we paid for this CalPEST system in the past for, you know, last 25 years or so, many people have had invested, you know, significant amount of time and communication with the department on how to move this kind of technology and project forward. So I'm not saying I'm skeptical, but I'd certainly like to have a better feeling on how the accountability might work through this process, and can we get part of the system in place, more like a tiered system. Somebody mentioned it earlier. So the better this can be implemented and shown to be effective and successful early on, I think is important to a lot of us. So I appreciate what you're doing. And I think the system is extremely important. And a lot of us have supported this kind of technology for years and years. So we look forward to being implemented, and hope the department reaches out to affected parties and moves this forward in a terrific fashion. So again, thank you for you know, all your hard work, and just like to wish you continued success. So take care.
Thanks, Dave. And I will say I appreciate that there is a certain amount of I'll use your term of skepticism here about what this looks like. We understand that this is not the first time that we've talked about it, and to be really frank, it is frustrating to us as well that it has taken as long as it has to move forward on this. With regards to registrant engagement in the past on this has been hugely valuable to us as we've been going through and looking at developing criteria and parameters. And we are, you know, we had to regroup a little bit internally to figure out what were the core needs that we had within the department for this moving forward. But we are anticipating sort of restarting some of our registrant discussions on this before even the program launches, to make sure that we're capturing your perspectives, capturing needs for the various companies that we work with, and that those are reflected in the final product.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Dave. Looks like we have no other hands raised to talk. So let's move to the email portion. Chelsea Raycraft, do we have any questions in the Reg Fees email box?
Yes, we do. Our first question is from Richard Gupton. He says, has DPR conducted an economic and agronomic analysis on the potential impact that proposed pesticide registration fee and proposed tax increase will have on California's agricultural industry? It appears the proposed increases will increase the cost of production agriculture and make it less competitive in the global marketplace. It will also increase costs on consumers.
So no, we have not done that analysis. And I think this is, again, a point that we would be interested to hear feedback of your perspective about extent of impact. I will say that there are, you know, product costs get diluted out significantly when you're looking at a single registration versus hundreds thousands, hundreds of thousands of products sold. So I think we would certainly be interested to hear more about your perspectives on what the impacts of that would be.
Our next email is from Lisa McClellan. How long will paper submissions still be accepted once the electronic database is operational?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are anticipating an overlap between when we have the system up and running and when paper submissions will continue to be accepted. I don't know that we've established a date at which, I don't know that we will ever stop accepting paper submissions. We will certainly be encouraging people to submit electronically. And we're hoping to see pretty significant movement as that system comes online. But we will still be opening mail as necessary.
The next question in the email is from Richard Gupton. Can you discuss what the projected revenue would be for DPR if the proposed mill taxes were implemented in addition to the pesticide registration fee increase?
So that information is in the fund condition statement as a part of the overall budget. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but this proposal is looking to add roughly $5 million annually, $4 to $5 million annually for our registration costs, and the mill increase when fully implemented would be $45 million annually.
Thank you. Our next question is from Ann Downs. Have any of the listed efficiency improvements identified been previously implemented? And if so, have they decreased the processing time? If not, what performance measures are in place to evaluate if the improvements result in decreasing timeframes?
Julio, do you want to take this one? You're on mute.
Okay, could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Have any of the listed efficiency improvements identified been previously implemented? And if so, have they decreased the processing time?
Yes, as I mentioned before, some of those we have implemented before with the goal of creating consistency among staff. For example, the training of the new staff, we standardized that. But that was for creating consistency. So if a staff is on vacation or it is leave extended time, another staff can step in and keep the work going. So that consistency we have. Other measures that or strategies that we are currently working have not been implemented yet. Some as a pilot, for example, the routing criteria we have implemented, and we are gathering information from other branches where we need to fine tune, as well as the consultation process. We have seen fewer products being routed for sure. If I sign every week the products materials entering evaluation, and I'm seeing fewer products going into evaluation. So that's a good sign. So yes, we don't have the full data yet to share with you, but we will have on the coming months as we start implementing those initiatives. And I'm more than happy to share that with you guys.
I would say, just to add, that our key performance indicators on this are average time in station, as well as number of submissions handled within a station. And we use both metrics as a way of looking at efficiencies and improvements within our process.
Thank you. Our next question is from Anna Koester. Are you considering setting a review/decision timeframe with the new registration fee, as EPA does with each PREA classification?
Yeah, so I responded to this earlier, but to say that we would need a lot, I'll just add again for those, if someone missed it, is that this is something that would require a lot more discussion for us to talk about how is this working with EPA, and how would that work relative to our statutory requirements and practices, procedures, and obligations relative to environmental and human health review.
Thank you. Our next question is from Emily Syed. Thank you for the helpful presentation. Will you please provide a bit more context in what data led to the development of the 4 proposed scenarios? For example, did DPR presume that the average number of applications submitted over the past 5 years is representative of the number of applications that are anticipated to be submitted with the new fee structure?
So yes, we did assume that past trends would hold into the future. There's, again, year-to-year variability in terms of what this looks like. We're not anticipating major changes in what registration submissions would look like moving forward with this proposal.
Thank you. Our next question is from Marcia Crow. If the fees are implemented by September 2021, will all existing registrations be liable for the updated renewal fees for all of 2021?
I believe the answer is yes, but I will defer to one of my team to confirm.
Our plan is to implement those new fees as we did back in 2015. So the new submissions is starting on that time. Once the new fee is effective, submissions moving forward that are received will be subject to the new fee structure. The ones that we are already in-house, that will be processed as is. Now, if you decide, depending on the time of the year, you decide, okay, I'm going to push this registration for the next year, so I don't have to incur into a renewal fee, then we have to discuss that product, that aspect. We have not decided that yet.
Thank you. My apologies, the leaf blower started right outside my window. The next question is from Danielle Ward. Will the electronic submission allow for data submissions in XML format?
I'll leave that to Clint.
So during the last effort, we did discuss using potentially GHSTS, but it appeared that it was not widely in use at the time. At this point, we would maybe potentially look to develop our own standardized XML format to accept submissions in an XML format.
Okay, thank you. There have been several questions regarding whether the the slides will be available.
So at this time, we're not planning to post the slides, but we will have a recording of the presentation available on our YouTube channel, hopefully next week. There's some formatting and accessibility requirements that we need to do prior to posting. If you are interested in receiving a copy of the slides, please email the regfees@cdpr.ca.gov, and we're happy to provide you with a copy.
Thank you. This attendee is asking, have you considered raising the fees for amendments that require data review, or is the average number of such amendments not high enough to make it worthwhile?
Yeah, basically that you're correct. The number of submissions would not have a huge impact. We had that structure in the past before our last fee increase, which we would require a fee for if it was data associated. And that was a complicated thing. Sometimes we had to refunds and fees were not submitted, so it was complicated to keep track. And so this time we decided to keep as our previous one, a flat fee for all types of submissions.
Thank you. The next question is from Dana Thomas. You mentioned that some reviews may be done concurrently / in parallel, but others need to be sequential. Can you please define which are which?
Sure. So some of this is going to depend on the particular product, but I'll give an example. So Most of our products will go through the chemistry evaluation station, which will look at some of the basic physical properties of the pesticide product. That information is then used by a number of other stations, such as ecotox, surface water, again, if you're routed to those particular stations. And so that review has to happen before those products can move to subsequent stations. To some extent, this will be a case-by-case evaluation, but we do expect there to be stations that we can run in parallel. Julie, if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, I think you covered. Yeah, some of are dependable, but in general, the data will be available concurrently. So if needed, they already have the data available at their fingertips.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, in the grand scheme of the overall review timeline, is spending these costs on the e-system determined to be more beneficial than spending toward other bottlenecks, such as evaluation team staffing?
Yeah, I appreciate the comment. And I think this is something that we are kind of carefully looking at, is what is our overall staffing for the different stations? What are the review timelines associated with that? And then what is the overall net improvement to our system as a whole as a part of this? You know, the products, there are certain products that will never go to a review station when they're coming in for handling within the department. And so any changes to our evaluation stations wouldn't affect wouldn't affect those products. Whereas an electronic submission system will cover all 17,000 submissions that we get annually and will help for our routing for each and every one of those. We haven't gone through and done a detailed line-by-line assessment, but given the net benefits across the entire program, we do think that this is a really important investment.
Thank you. The next question is, will you send out a breakdown on the different scenarios so that we can provide proper feedback and perspective?
Sure, so there's information on the scenarios as a part of California Notice 2021-03, which was sent out last week. And again, we'll be looking for written feedback through April 19th.
Thank you. Those are all the questions that we have.
Great, thanks, Chelsea.
You're welcome.
And we have no other questions in the Q&A box, nor for the raised hand in the attendees.
All right, wonderful. Well, with that, I'll reiterate next steps of where we're headed, although we've covered all of these points already as a part of our questions. So as I've mentioned, we have a written comment period that's extending through April 19th. Would really encourage feedback to be provided to us. We'll be using comments that we've received as a part of this session, as well as all written comments in kind of guiding the decision-making process that we're looking at moving forward. We are, as I've mentioned, planning to initiate our emergency rulemaking process in August of 2021 with an effective date for the increased fees in September of 2021. And so the information for submitting comments is on the next slide. We are accepting comments either via email or in mail. We would really encourage email. I think that's easier for everyone these days, but we will be checking our inbox if those come in through the mail system. Very much appreciate everyone's time, attendance, and engagement on this issue. We know that a lot of the work that we do in registration is a dialogue in between the department and the registrants as we move forward, processing information and trying to appropriately review and register products within the state. So thank you so much to everyone. Tulio or Val, want to open this up for any closing comments that you might have?
I just wanted to add, again, reiterate that we are very pleased, that with your participation and your questions. We don't take it for granted. We know that whatever decision we make will have an impact on the industry in California, how you do business with California. So we don't take that granted. So we will look into every single comment, every single question, and try to address or consider when we're making our decisions. So feel free to send your comments. And if you have additional questions that we're not able to come up with today, please feel free to send those on our emails. We are more than happy to address them as needed. So again, I wanted to thank you. I want to thank our staff that is working hard to make sure that we will have this opportunity to share this information with you. So thank you everybody that's on supporting staff. So with that, thank you.
Aaron, on behalf of the whole DPR team, I just want to thank everybody for their engagement today, their excellent questions, and the input that they've provided and will provide. As you can tell, we've spent a lot of time developing this proposal and developing today's webinar, frankly, and really just appreciate the fact that so many of you took time out of your morning to ask us questions and engage with us on this very important process. So thank you very much.
And with that, we will close the webinar. Thank you, and we look forward to hearing from you. Take care and have a great rest of your day.